Hi, I'm Carole Robinson. Welcome to this edition of County Happenings, where we talk with the County Mayor, Rogers Anderson, about what's going on in the county.
Well, there is lots going on.
Yeah.
You know, we started the week off, and by the way, Veterans Day was 11/11/11. It's always that day.
Always that day, and we give you a little background about why it's always that day.
Love to hear it.
It goes back to World War I, when the armistice was finally set. It wasn't the peace treaty, but it was the armistice where they stopped shooting each other at 11 o'clock in the morning on November 11th. It started out as Decoration Day and then became Veterans Day, I think, in the 50s. And ever since then, we've always celebrated on November 11th at 11. We have our parade at 11 o'clock in the morning. And it's one of the few holidays that has never been changed as far as becoming a weekend holiday.
So it's interesting. Of course, you did a great job on the Herald's articles about the different men and women that have been in the military. And every year I look forward to finding out more about my fellow veterans. But
I just wish I could do more because there's so many great stories out there.
And you're right. There's only 3 holidays that have never been changed by Congress. Most of the holidays are wrapped around a weekend, like Friday or Thursday, and then they give Friday off. And it's all about economics. Right. It's about people being able to travel. But the 3 holidays that have never been changed, certainly Veterans Day, it's always remained 11/11.
Yeah. 4th of July.
4th of July and Christmas.
And Christmas.
And those 3 days, if they fall on Wednesday, they fall on Sunday. That's just when you have them.
Yeah.
So, it's kind of interesting that those 3 holidays have made it all the way through the last 100 years, and nobody's touched them.
And I think that's great. I think that
I do too.
It makes them extra special. I know a lot of people, if they're not involved with veterans in the family and that kind of stuff, they kind of gloss over Veterans Day. But to me, having a veteran in the family and knowing so many, I am so glad that we actually make the day special for our veterans and for our community.
Well, in our Veterans Day, I know that the people that are watching this may not see the significance of having it at a particular time, but the parade and the activities that go on Veterans Day are second to none. Now, it may not be a mile-long parade, but there's bands involved.
There's kids.
There's kids, and there are many, many men and women at some level, ROTC, all of them are involved in this parade that goes 10, 12 blocks, goes around the square and goes out.
Well, some of these veterans are getting older now, and they can't walk that far.
Well, that's true. And and you've heard this before, so I'll say it again. Our World War II veterans, they're dying off very rapidly in our society, and they were the greatest men of the greatest nation during that period of time. And then there's a few Korean veterans that live in our community. We have about 10,000. A bulk of our community is made up of Vietnam vets. Out of the approximately 10,000 veterans that we have, I would say a high percentage of those were during that era. And it was during that period of time when the soldiers came back, there was no parade.
It was a sad period of time for our country.
Our country not only despised the war,
they despised the soldier.
But they despised the soldier. So many young men coming back home after that period of time changed from their military clothes into civilian clothes at the airport, making that last run home, because it was so volatile in the 70s. And I am so glad that our society has changed and said, okay, I cannot like the war. That's your choice, whether you approve of the war or not. But the men and women that serve today, they're volunteers.
Right.
And they sign up and they feel a sense of dedication and commitment to the cause. And once they raise their right hand, they're following the orders.
They don't know where they're going to be sent
No.
and what their jobs are going to be?
No, they do not. So I'm glad to see that we can disagree on whether or not we should be in these battles, but at least that soldier who's doing what he thinks is honored and revered. And let's not forget, the Veterans Day is about all veterans, and then
Right.
Memorial Day, it's about the ones that have given the ultimate sacrifice.
Right, right.
But it was a great parade.
And a great turnout, and the weather held off. Boy, talk about God's blessings.
Yes, yes, it was. Well, we went from that and immediately, I mean, there were several activities that day. I know Spring Hill Funeral Home, give them a plug. They always have an event honoring. It takes about an hour and a half that Pam Stevens does, and down at Spring Hill. And Mark Green, our congressman, had an event in the Grassland area, which he spoke for a good 45 minutes. I mean, he gets fired up. He's passionate about the veteran.
I love to see this man's passion and anything that has to do with this country. But he gets going about his veterans.
Oh yeah. He and then the Republican Party hosted a breakfast on a Saturday morning, and then I was at Summit last Thursday night and one on Friday. Different schools that are having different programs for our veterans. So our community is really, really engaged in veterans.
Yeah.
Considering we don't have an air base, we don't have any bases here.
No, it's amazing, and so many veterans. That's the comment they make, that they've never been any place where there's so many veterans that they know about because there's so much going on.
And
for
I've
them.
got to throw in Costco. I was sitting here thinking.
Oh yes.
There's a
Those
Costco,
every Friday night, Friday afternoon.
Every Friday morning, hot dogs and Cokes are provided for any veteran to come in and sit down, and these men, mostly men, sit around, and it's a fraternity.
It is, and that's what the military builds. And unfortunately, that's what the Vietnam veterans missed when they came back, was that fraternity.
And I guess the final thing I'll talk, yesterday at the noon Rotary, there's a Green Beret Foundation, and one of its directors lives in our community. He was talking about the foundation for the Green Berets.
And their big bourbon bash that they had?
Well, I did not go, but I understand they had a pretty good size event and raised quite a bit of money. And they support the Green Berets and their efforts, and the widows for life sustaining the rest of their life if they lose their husband. And I forgot how many he mentioned just in the last decade, how many Green Berets have not made back on. We hear about the SEALs, and we hear about but the Green Berets. Barry Sadler did a song about that back in the 60s or 70s called The Green Beret.
John Wayne was in a movie about that.
And John Wayne. So they were the big name back 40 and 50 years ago, like the SEALs, the Navy SEALs are today.
Yeah, you don't hear much about them, but it doesn't mean they don't exist. Yeah,
they're in more. They're not high profile as much as they used to, but there's still plenty of Green Berets doing the work.
And they're still getting stuff done.
And still getting things done.
Yes, sir. So talking about community, our community's growing again, and we've got some new.
Has it stopped?
Well, but we've got a major company that has just joined the community. Talk about Mitsubishi coming in.
Mitsubishi, Motor Company of North America, located from California to the Cool Springs area. And Monday night, the county commissioners did some what we call tax increment financing, where we kind of rebate some of their property tax, not including the school tax portion of that, to the tune of about half $500,000 over a 10-year window. And of course, they'll more than pay for that just in other property taxes and the school taxes, sales tax, and their spending power. They're bringing, well, they're not bringing, there's 200 jobs that are involved. There'll be a couple of dozen, maybe 3 dozen employees that'll relocate. So
it's not a big impact then.
It's not a big impact, but 140 jobs are offered to our Middle Tennessee area, and they had
and these are quality, high-paying jobs.
Average is over $90,000 to $95,000 a year. So yes, those are good jobs. And when the commission does this, and it passed, I think there were 2 no votes, One of them always votes no. They just do not believe we should give incentives, and I get that. But I also know that these jobs that are, these companies that are looking at our community, and for me it's about jobs. It's a competitive world out there, and Mitsubishi told us that, you know, they were considering Texas and considering some other state, but they settled on Tennessee for a lot of reasons. No state income tax. The state of Tennessee has got a good track record in working with automobile companies, Nissan and Toyota, and GM, but the one that we have in our county certainly is Nissan. And those 200 jobs that were advertised, they had one of the conditions they put on them. They wanted to be able to advertise those jobs here at the local level. So Matt Largent and Elizabeth McCurry got together and they had a job day where people came in. They had over 400 people to apply for these 150 to 200 jobs, and they're going to do that again. So we know that we are getting those jobs. Now, they may not all be Williamson County folks, but a vast majority of them will. And so there's this discussion to the mayor that says, Mayor, why do we even have to do this? I mean, won't they just come here anyway? And the answer is, you know, I can't say 100% for sure they will, but I can tell you that other counties and states want these companies to come into their community for the jobs that they offer. And you and I, unfortunately, we're getting a little gray hair. Yours not as bad as mine.
Oh. Only Lady Carole knows that.
When we go back 10 or 12 years ago and we had a recession here, and you and I'm older than you, but not a great deal. You and I have gone through about 3 or 4 recessions. We've never really gone through a depression like they had in the 30s. And when those recessions, when those slowdowns occur in your community, you need a lot of one word, and you say it best. It's called
diversity.
And diversity of those jobs all across the board.
You know, because the communities that are hit the hardest during these recessions are communities that centered on just one. They're known for healthcare, or they're known for their automotive, or they're known for government jobs, or they've just got one common. And Williamson County has managed to be very diverse.
Well, and Williamson County is very diverse. We have some great corporations. We've done 12, 13, I think 14 different tax incentive jobs, from Tractor Supply to Nissan to Primus. The last 2 or 3 years, you did the Lee Company. Wasn't a great big tax incentive, but it was enough to keep them here. Dave Ramsey, he's up to 600 or 700, 800 jobs. A lot of those jobs were outside the area, so they came in, so they buy our houses and they buy our cars, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We all know that at some point there will be another slowdown of the economy. We don't have a crystal ball and says when.
Right. Well, talk about, speaking of slow, we had a slowdown a few years ago, and the impact on Williamson County. Talk about how we got through it.
You're talking about the one in 08, 9, and 10.
And you know, there's a lot of people living here now that weren't here at the time.
Yeah. Well, so it kind of went like this. About 2006-07, the nation started having a slowdown. Eventually got to us. But as a general rule, we were impacted, but we just weren't severely impacted.
Right.
Houses were still selling, and they were still selling at market value. If you go back and research some of the reappraisals we did, they didn't drop off during that period of time like so many other cities and counties.
And new housing slowed down, but it never stopped.
That's correct. Here at the government level, we didn't have to lay anybody off, but we did move people around to satisfy the job needs. I mean, if you, on a typical day up in the Register of Deeds office where all the transactions are going on for real estate, it's busy all day long, but during that period of time, it's kind of slow. So at that time, Sadie Wade and I had a talk, and we kind of shuffled some people around. Usually your court system increases when you have a slowdown. People are stealing, and there's a little bit of more activity.
There's a lot of anger going on.
So we shifted and rotated people around to handle the court system a little without hiring and without laying off. Our automobile industry here managed to do what they had to. But in healthcare is not it's not affected as much by slowdowns of activity, because people still get sick. You need services, you need nurses. But maybe the corporate level, they don't need as many bodies, so they'll consolidate and roll them around. But what we saw was totally different than what was occurring across the nation. We still were able to be one of the lowest unemployment numbered county. And so when you think about these new jobs that are coming into your community, most of them they never make the front page of the paper. They're expansions of companies that are already here. They're their mom and pop, that small business that just pops up on Main Street. Entrepreneurs, 25% of our workforce are men and women that do their own thing in their own business. Some of them have a retail operation, but some of them just work right out of their homes.
And I was surprised back in 2008, 2010, how many people who had gotten laid off from well-paying jobs started a home-based job in this community.
So I think all of that has to go into that what I call chili bowl, a mixture, that it's got a bubble, and you hope you're making good decisions. But if you and I reflect back into the 70s, when they had literally a global recession, and it was all based on oil, the price of oil.
Right, where you couldn't get gas, but only every other day.
And, gas was selling for 29, 39 cents, and it popped up at $1.50 and $1.25 and $2. And, I mean, when it goes like that, the working man, the working woman has a very difficult time. But it was also fueled by there wasn't enough. It was just shut off. And we couldn't get the oil products here in the United States that we needed to sustain the things that we do. We're a very high user of energy across. So, but you look at the global effects it affected the entire universe. In the mid 80s and the late 80s, the stock market just bottomed off. You heard about people just, oh my goodness, what are we going to do? That affected the United States. There was some effect of that in China and Japan, but for the most part, that was the United States-driven stock market crash. There were lots of reasons. Then we had the bank fiasco, but most economists will tell you you're going to have these ups and downs in the economy. The stock market today is as high as it's ever been.
Yeah.
And it's performing at an incredible level. And you say, well, Mayor, what's that got to do with Williamson County? It all has to do with Williamson County and all of the other points around. The jobs that we're seeing coming into our community today help us when we have that next slowdown. It's as simple as that. It's not about the taxes, it's about the jobs that we've got here. And we've got more jobs than we've got people to handle. So it's econ basically 101. It's called supply and demand. And when we stop encouraging that growth of our community in terms of jobs, and I'm not talking about housing or anything else that goes with it, and then you begin to worry.
Because if you're not growing,
you're probably sliding backwards. Very few things in life stay the same, including our weight.
Unfortunately. And once you start that slide back, it's very hard to regain the momentum.
Yes, it is.
So even if you've got you continually have to be ahead of the game.
It's kind of like I grew up. My mom and dad you've heard me say it over and over. They're the best parents a boy would ever want. But Daddy took a step at a time to get everything he needed to get done from the spring to the crops came in. I mean, it was just consistent, and you have You just have to stay the course. As the country folks say, find a fence row at the end and you march right to it,
Right.
and then you turn around and hit the fence post going the other way and your rows are straight. Those are all country terms, but they all mean something.
Apply to
in
life.
It is a fact of life, and there's nothing more devastating, I'm sure there are, but when you lose your job and you're not able to feed your family, be it male, be it female, it's devastating to watch your home maybe just
Yeah.
go away and your savings. And so it is about that high level, looking at and hoping and praying and preparing for what's coming down the road. And we're going to disagree on things. We're going to disagree on businesses. We're going to disagree on philosophies. But time over time, jobs are the best cure, the best medicine, the best RX that you can have for a community. And I'm not predicting, I'm not a forecaster. I don't know when that next time will be for a slowdown, but it will come. It has to come. And that's just the way it is. And society is we've never seen any, this is the longest period of time we've had where we've not really had a slowdown. So some people say, well, it should just be around the corner. Others are saying, no, we're doing things to avoid that. But
At some point or another.
and we're seeing some of that. It depends on what industry. If you're in the steel industry right now, forget about politics. It costs more to get steel into our country from other places because of the tariffs and the
Right.
agriculture side. So they offset the agriculture side by putting more money in Congress to help the farmer. I mean, it's a vicious circle way beyond my intelligence. But I do understand basic 101 business, and I understand what a community has to have in order to avoid running into real problems. You and I know counties and cities all across Tennessee that are would love to have some of the headaches that we've got with traffic and some of the other things because they don't have the jobs. They don't have the broadband that offers the jobs. They don't have the highways that get them to the communities,
Yeah.
et cetera,
They don't
et
have
cetera,
the
et cetera.
infrastructure to draw the jobs, and they don't have the funds to go after the infrastructure.
And all that has to be managed.
Yeah.
You-
I look at this county, that management didn't just start. That management started 30, 40, 50 years ago. This doesn't, things like this just don't happen. It takes time. And it took visionaries 50 years ago to look down the road 50 years and say, this is what we'd like to see, and this is what we're going for.
One of our dear friends that passed away actually a year ago on the 13th did as much to help this county and this state as a budget chairman of the state of Tennessee was Charles Sargent.
Yes.
And when the Hall's tax, which is a tax that the wealthy have to pay on the dividend tax on their stocks and bonds and their disbursement of their income, when we don't have a state income tax, the Hall's tax has been repealed. The inheritance tax is now married up with the federal inheritance tax. For a long time, Tennessee had a reputation, great place to live and work.
But don't want to die here.
Don't want to die here because they're going to take all your money. And so all of those little taxes that we see were removed at the state or federal, and now some of those were shifted down to the local level. We got to figure out a way to, because we were receiving some of those dollars, and so if those dollars stop, we got to figure out another way to get it done. But these companies like Mitsubishi are coming here because it's a low-tax state.
Right.
It's a good business community. And then they've settled on communities like ours in Williamson County and Franklin and Brentwood and Spring Hill and Thompson Station and Fairview and Nolensville. They settled on because of quality of life, low crime, good schools, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we're very, very fortunate, but all of that is low tax base. I read in the paper one of the larger cities, the comptroller is basically, just this morning I read in the paper, the comptroller has gone to him and said, you got to get your house in order. If you don't get it in order, the state will come in and take it over. Now, that's pretty blunt.
Yeah.
When the comptroller walks into a city and says, you've got to do something. That probably means there's going to be some tax raising. But or they're going to be a combination of tax raising, or they're going to be a reduction of
Services.
Water and sewer and roads, all those things cost the same and more. But there's a lot of services that government, cities and counties offer that are way beyond the scope of what our forefathers ever thought we should do.
Right, and if you're a city that's in having problems, you've got to reevaluate which are the most important.
So it is a difficult mix, but jobs help offset some of that, Carol. And I know there are people watching this and say, yeah, but it causes us to build more schools. We'll lead into that in a little bit and puts more people on our roads. Those are all consequences of people moving here, and government needs to get our act together and try to figure out a way to fix those.
Yeah. Roads are the biggest problem.
Roads are, schools are too. You got to pay for those things.
Schools are too, and we just got a few minutes, but Williamson County schools are doing, 2 minutes, are starting their 5-year capital plan. How many schools in 5 years?
Well, several years ago, we put together a plan to help pay for bricks and mortars, and we're good for the next 4 to 5 years on schools. Jason Golden, the new school superintendent, school director, or whatever they call him. We've got 2 schools currently will open this year, one on Goosey Hill, which is now off Arnold Road, and then, where's the other one? Middle school on Henpeck Lane. Both of those have a name. I don't remember what they are. That's a middle school on Henpeck Lane. And so they'll be shifting.
And that's, that Oakview leads into it, is that correct? Oakview Elementary
You're probably right.
feeds into the middle school, and I think it may be
I think it's side by side.
Yeah.
And so we own some land there, and they're building the school. So yes, and we got 2 or 3 more. They're looking for sites and locations, and so I'd say over the next 5 years, we'll see at least 5 schools.
Once again, a school a year.
And over the next 10 years, I think our master plan called for us to do 10 to 12, but we're adding on Page and Ravenwood and Brentwood, and everybody's getting a makeover by growth.
Yeah. And to try and keep the number of schools down, expanding, which then goes against philosophies of how big schools should be. So changes in the...
We can't answer all these questions in 30 minutes.
No, but we hope to answer them another time, and we hope to see you next time on County Happenings.